Alrighty, folks, and we're back at it with the latest Big Mets update segment that we have here that we're actually pre-recording our live post-game segment that you guys can check out our post-game coverage every single night on the WardyNYM platform on YouTube, on Twitter X, or wherever you get your audio podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star review should you do that as well, and thank you so much in advance for doing so. But this has been cut out and posted after the fact because I know you guys probably have a lot more interest in the following topics than you do on solely the Mets losing 3-2 to the Marlins in a series finale. Heartbreaking loss, another frustrating way to end a series, especially with a big 10-game stretch, probably the most grueling 10-game stretch among all major league teams of baseball, with the Orioles, the Diamondbacks, and the Padres also hot outside the D-backs over the past 24 hours. So we'll get into those coverage as we typically do on the WardyNYM platform. But I'm coming at you today, folks, because we have a lot to get into in Mets land, presented by BetUS, America's #1 sports book. Make sure to check them out today by clicking that link down below in the description. That way you too get a 125% bonus, and not your first, not your second, but your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. And as we're going to break this one down now, folks, we have a lot to say, and apologies in advance if you see a little gnats. I got fruit flies around right now as I'm out and about right now, enjoying myself out of town, and they're being a pain in my neck, but we're going to continue on with the show here as you smash that like and subscribe button, as you always do, and thank you so much again for that. We have a lot of key updates in Mets land on Jett Williams, Mets top outfield prospect, not top outfield prospect, Mets top prospect overall, coming out of the infield. Obviously, he can get reps in outfield for sure, but we view him more as an infield prospect, barring changes at this current time. Denil Nunes, his imminent return. We're going to talk about that, the latest updates on Nunes. And yes, we have some keynotes to make on not only David Stearns, but Jeremy Hefner. Jeremy Hefner, David Stearns, is there at all a connection for him to be more than a pitching coach for the Mets? Yes, there is. And yes, if you are not in favor of Jeremy Hefner as he currently stands as pitching coach, you are not going to enjoy what I have to relay to each and every one of you today based on the latest reports that we'll touch on a little bit on Starling Marte and Brett Batty, their continued performance. Marte returning back to the Mets live, and Brett Batty, why he is absolutely doing everything in his power to warrant a potential call-up when rosters expand. But let's start here with the big news that I'm sure many of you guys want to know, which has to do with, again, Mets top prospect and Jett Williams. What is going on with Jett the Met? Well, let's break down what's going on with Jett the Met, because there's something very notable that came out yesterday, actually from a diehard Mets fan, but they are reputable. This has been reposted from a good supporter of mine and a guy that does some very strong Mets coverage as well through Metsmerize, that being, and yes, Mr. Michael Mayer. And Michael made me aware of the following that we just saw over the past day. Let me have this pulled up for each and every one of you so I can break it down and we get into everything on the following here. Just give me 1 second, folks. There we go. And now let me show you the following slide. Alrighty, folks, as you see here, yes, breaking news, Mets top prospect. And again, I have him as Mets top prospect still, especially when evaluating offense. If you want to call him number 2 prospect because of Brandon Sproat, I understand that. That's fine. Pick your poison between the two. Either's fine with me. No less, Mets top prospect and 2022 first-round pick Jett the Met Williams will begin a rehab assignment with Port St. Lucie on Wednesday and play Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, then hopefully back to Binghamton on Tuesday. Jett will also be playing in the Arizona Fall League. This is massive news for Jett Williams, who's missed basically the entire season due to an unfortunate wrist injury, tried to avoid surgery. They gave him the cortisone shot originally, I believe, tried to go through that, and then he ultimately needs surgery. Jett Williams, who has missed the majority of the season in the minor leagues, sadly, will finally be making his way back sooner than later, beginning as soon as this Wednesday. Amazing news here for Jett Williams, who, let's not forget, was tearing the cover off the ball as a true contact king that we saw in the minor leagues for the Mets just a season ago. And to give you guys just some clarity on how good Jett Williams has been for the Mets when called upon, I mean, as a young prospect, what he has done over the past year is insane. A year ago, I was at spring training. I had the pleasure of interviewing Jett Williams. Little did I know that over that course of the next year, he would go on to be the Mets top prospect, one could rightfully argue, with his continued great production. But let's get into Jett Williams here, because I want to talk about what's out so much about him in this one, and really what he has done so well throughout his career, which is why Mets fans are really excited and frothing at the mouth to a degree at the prospect of seeing their top prospect with the Mets. Not this season, obviously, but hopefully we can see him maybe at some point next season, which definitely can be possible. Jett Williams, who skyrocketed in the minor leagues last season, that we saw beginning in low A, working all the way up that we saw to double A, so went through 3 different leagues, and the low A level, he had 6 home runs, 35 RBIs, 51 runs scored, and 32 stolen bags in just 79 games, a 249 average, a 422 OBP, and a 410 slug for a 136 WRC plus. He moves up to high A with the Brooklyn Cyclones. In 36 games there, 7 home runs, 25 runs scored, 18 RBIs, 12 stolen bags, a 299 average, a 451 on base percentage, and a 567 slug for a 167 WRC plus. Then he moves up to Double A, and only in 6 games has himself 2 RBIs, a stolen bag, and a 65 WRC plus in a very limited sample size. So he was still getting acclimated to the Double A level, and it wasn't expected that he would take long to go from Double A to ultimately make the jump then to Triple A in the bigs. Sadly, has missed this entire year due to injury, but Jett Williams finally healthy, finally ramping up. We're going to see him back in the Mets minor league starting this week as soon as Wednesday, with hopes of him being back with the Rummel Ponies there at the Double A level over the next week or so. So fingers crossed everything goes in the right direction there for Mr. Jett Williams as he continues his progress as the Mets, again, one can rightfully argue their top prospect. So that is the latest there on that, folks. 567 slug night. Yeah, it's nice. And again, Jett is not a guy that I expect a lot of power from whatsoever. So should it happen, great. But again, it's not something that I'm overly expecting at the major league level. He definitely profiles as a great contact hitter that has a tremendous eye at the plate that can give you, a 350 to 400 OBP when things are going right, because that's how good he is at the minor league level right now. Let's see how he adjusts, ramping up now back from his wrist injury, and ultimately just seeing him back in ball games is going to be huge. So very excited to see the future of Jett Williams for the remainder of this season heading into 2025. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments down below to my replay viewers as well, along with my live viewers currently watching live on YouTube as part of our post-game segment. Now, we talked a bit there about Jett Williams. Now let's get into our next topic here, which is going to have plenty to do with Mr. Denil Nunes. And as we break down Denil Nunes, let's just take a look here at SNY and see what Mr. Carlos Mendoza had to say himself on the latest for Denil Nunes. And apologies in advance to my replay viewers if there's some gaps in between of just us talking about these segments. I may cut them out, but if they're not too long, then I won't bother with that. We also saw Christian Scott throwing today at Citi Field. That is awesome to see, everybody. Christian Scott continues to ramp up after initially being shut down for 2 weeks from the Mets, and he is continuing to throw, and hopefully we'll see him back in rehab action sooner rather than later, as Scott is an arm that the Mets may still be able to consider utilize as a starter or relief option before the season's end. Scott, who was brilliant when he was first called up by the Mets this season, quickly had a labor issue when it came to facing lefty batters, which was completely drastic splits from righty batters he'd face. Just didn't have success, couldn't get that sweeper against them as well. They were really eating him up on his off-speed and breaking pitches. And that fastball, which he pounds on the zone plenty, is prone to giving up a long ball, at least one every single start. No less, Christian Scott continuing to work his way back. Happy to see the positive updates there. And then we see here on Mr. Denil Nunes, he will throw an inning and 15 to 20 pitches on Tuesday for AAA Syracuse. So awesome updates there from Mr. Carlos Mendoza, Mets manager himself. Why is this important? Let's not forget how impactful Denil Nunes was up until he was down with injury. In over 20 innings for the Mets this season, Nunes has posted right around a 2.4 ERA or so. The expected numbers are brilliant. His K to walk ratio has been unbelievably strong, and Nunes has been one of the few relievers that has not only been reliable to the Mets in both non-leverage and high-leverage situations, while also commanding the strike zone as well as he has this season. Nunes, there is no denying that should the Mets get him returning to the Mets as soon as sometime over the next week or so, will be absolutely vital to their bullpen configuration, especially with guys like Reed Garrett, who had another less than ideal outing. The Mets know that pretty much whoever's the latest bad apples as the guys that they will part with down the stretch once Nunes returns sooner than later, with Sean Reed-Foley still working his way back as they're tweaking his mechanics in the minor league level, working on his rehab stint. And then you have some other arms the Mets may consider at the AAA level as well. All I know is Denil Nunes has been that one constant for the Mets among very few constants of consistency when evaluating relievers for the Mets that have gotten the job done this year, but have also not walked the entire ballpark. Denil Nunes, a 12.15 K per nine this season at 33.1 innings to a 2.16 walks per 9. A 10K to walk ratio difference there is massive that we see there. A 10.7% to be exact. A 2.43 ERA, 2.46 expected ERA, a 2.36 FIP, a 2.47 expected FIP. I love that so much. That fastball, which touches up 99 there on the gun. Like a mini Edwin Diaz in a lot of ways. With that slider that touches in the high 80s, that 1-2 punch mix has been brilliant as a true setup option for the Mets to consider there. My apologies as my audio through Fangraphs just decided to run stupid for a second there. But Denil Nunes, who has been absolutely nails for the Mets, will be returning to them sooner rather than later, and he will officially be ramping up now with AAA Syracuse being stretched out for 15 to 20 pitches that we're going to be seeing in due time. So that is the latest there on Mr. Nunes. Yes, he is going to come back, and yes, it's going to be sooner than later, which is absolutely huge. Cannot wait to see him back in this Mets bullpen. And then with Reed Garrett faltering his latest outing, walking everyone their mother that we saw today at the time of recording this, that being August 18th, my big question when evaluating someone like that being in Reed Garrett and others is, how reliable are they going to be? Because if they're going to continue to have this 5+ walk rate and their split isn't going to be dominant as much as we'd hope it to be, then it's like, what point does Reed Garrett still have in this bullpen? The Mets may absolutely consider optioning someone like him or just making a tough decision. So we will find out the future of Mr. Reed Garrett. But in the interim, what we know now is that the Mets will absolutely have their situation figured out fairly comfortably. Not that's going to be the easiest thing in the world, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of concern level on figuring out who are the odd mans out for the Mets bullpen when they get to that point. So that is the latest there on the bullpen, everybody. Now let's get into the big stuff, the big juicy stuff that you probably want to hear that has come out over the past couple of days that just really hasn't been talked about enough yet or talked about much yet, because Andy Martino of SNY, that everyone loves, that absolutely no one says, right? Did come out recently with an article talking about David Stearns and his current vision on the Mets GM position. Let's not forget the Mets had Billy Epler as acting GM heading into the initial tenure of David Stearns, but after what we saw there, someone was basically like a whistleblower, someone ratted on Billy Epler, basically doing the Phantom IL that everyone basically uses, and he was suspended for a year in doing so, and he will no longer be in the Mets organization front office role, probably ever again if I had to guess. So David Stearns, who has honestly been pretty solid with handling things at the helm thus far. I know people haven't loved his bullpen, his trade deadline acquisitions. They feel that they are underwhelming. I understand that to a degree, while also understanding the big picture for a Mets team that's right where they want to be heading into the season. And for fans that knew what the expectation was heading into the season, nothing should be shocking right now. But having said that, still, this is still a Mets team that, as they debate, do they want a GM or not, they're now going to be making that decision sooner than later, that we may find out in the early offseason. Right now, it seems that David Stearns tends to be leaning no on really hiring one because he doesn't need one. And I truly do not believe that the Mets need another GM in that position to kind of balance ideas with David Stearns. I think that they're fine with how they currently have things set up. But should they go down the route of acquiring someone as their GM, there are a couple people that they are considering. And internal speculation, according to this report here from Andy Martino, suggests that Vice President and Special Assistant to the President of Baseball Operations, Eduardo Brazula, who they hired this past offseason coming over from the Milwaukee Brewers, is a guy that they may consider for that GM job should they wish it. But it's one of those things where the Mets aren't going to be prioritizing this necessarily per se as they have been in years past, knowing that they already have a competent Pobo there and David Stearns. But some other options that they may consider, according to industry insiders, have connected two guys from the Brewers, that being Matt Klentak that we saw from the Brewers and Mike Grootman of the Red Sox. Both guys that have had connections, however, to David Stearns and have had personal relationships during their time from Milwaukee as well. And that's just putting the Milwaukee connections 2 and 2 together. But the one thing that we can see here is one more thing to make a note of, and that is the potential idea of the Mets staying in-house with a GM option and it being Jeremy Hefner. Yes, this is something that I think people are either going to love or hate. I don't know if there's an in-between. I think two things can be true. I have not loved Jeremy Hefner as Mets pitching coach personally. I think that there are some things about Jeremy Hefner where I think he's way too long to really go out there and handle the staff when called upon. I think there's also opportunities where he has done very well and has done his job. But with the ups and downs of emotions that I personally have in my fandom with Jeremy Hefner, what we hear from folks around the league apparently have also mentioned Mets pitching coach Jeremy Hefner as a potential GM in the mold of Dodgers GM Brandon Gomes, who the Mets have considered in the past, and the Red Sox right now with Chief Baseball Officer Craig Bledsoe in his first year there at the helm. Both are former MLB pitchers with a firm grasp of contemporary ideas and data. Hefner has stuck in the organization among multiple different regimes. If you're wondering why exactly is this does go in hand more than just Hefner's abilities to help out the best when it comes to pitching. Hefner, who has obviously a more understanding mind than most, is a guy that isn't long removed from being retired at the MLB level, a former Met as well that understands all the newfound analytics and data, can definitely coincide and understand a front office mentality that David Stearns has as more of not necessarily a bookworm, but more that analytical mind that we see with more younger, vibrant front office GMs and president baseball operations. So Jeremy Hefner, if he moved up to that internal role of GM, that would have him out of the pitching role. So that could, again, be basically killing two birds with one stone for a good reason for the Mets. Maybe in getting him out of a role that it kind of went stale for him, that some may rightfully argue. I want to know your thoughts about Jeremy Hefner, no matter how much you love or hate him, in the comments down below as always. But also the idea of staying in-house with a guy who has been here with previous regimes and has built a rapport with Steve Cohen, especially since Cohen became owner all those years ago already. So that's the latest there on Jeremy Hefner, everybody. It's kind of crazy that the Mets may actually consider him in such a role. I don't foresee it to happen, but if the Mets are going to go internal, it is something to make a note of. Jeremy Hefner is absolutely a name that could be in that mix with a guy like Brazulla, who we mentioned, who the David Stearns had just hired during his time in Milwaukee. A good rapport that they have with each other as is already kind of leading the way in that regard. So Hefner, is he a certainty to become GM? Should the Mets even opt for a GM? No, but is he a possibility? Yes, and that is why we're breaking it down today on the latest on that front. So having said all that, everybody, now let's get into the final key notes that we have for you all, and they are brief, and they are the following. And let's start here with Mr. Brett Batty, because Brett Batty did the thing again today, folks. No matter how much you love or hate Brett Batty, because I know that we have fans that love Brett Batty that want to continue to see him thrive and get more opportunities at the MLB level. Then I also know that we have fans here that don't want to see Brett Batty at the major league level once again. They just don't want to see it. And Brett has been doing everything in his power to try to get called up back to the Mets. As you see here, he rips a towering another 400-plus foot home run, his third home run of the week. We have seen Mr. Brett Batty has now ripped 5 home runs in his past 9 games. Batty with 15 to 16 home runs and not even 60 games at the AAA level this season, repping north of a 260 average and a 860 or so OPS, has really been not only handling himself at the hot corner and at second base when called upon, but has really tapped into that power that we've seen showcased plenty at the AAA and other minor league levels, but have failed to see it consistently at the major league level. With the Mets expected to expand rosters to at least one position player and one pitcher, when that is going to be happening sooner than later, Brett Batty, who we just talked about a day or so ago, as a guy that is in the mix for them to consider. So my question to each and every one of you is, as Batty continues to be scorching hot at the AAA level, trying to do everything he can to warrant a call-up, do you think that he makes more sense than, say, a Eddie Rosario, a DJ Stewart, or even some other guys there at the minor league level, and a Jackie Bradley Jr., all outfield/DH options over at Brett Batty, who can be that infield option, not named Jeff McNeil, Jose Iglesias, Mark Vientos, based on defensive matchups late in the ball game, or just based on certain matchups. Say someone goes down, God forbid, knock on wood, with injury, you can have Brett Batty, who can handle the hot corner just fine. I'd even argue that his third base defense could even be better than Jose Iglesias, with Jose having a hiccup there the other day, just making kind of a bonehead decision with his hands, being a little too flashy with it. All I know is Brett Batty has definitely done himself a lot of favors with his continued production at the AAA level, and I will not be shocked if he is called upon with the Mets in due time. I want to know how you guys feel, if he's a more worthy option or the other more veteran outfield picks, in which the Mets already have a plethora of. But again, that may change in the next 24 to 48 hours should we find out some unfortunate news on Brennan Nimmo's impending MRI thanks to that shoulder injury. Fingers crossed it's nothing serious there, but once we find out an update, we will break that down on the channel when it is deemed best fit. So that's the latest updates there, everybody, when getting into Mr. Brett Batty, Denil Nunes, Jeremy Hefner, Jett Williams, and Starling Marte, who just returned the Mets lineup, had a single today. We love to see that. Hopefully he continues to thrive and be that contact, that solid hitting first mentality that Marte has been this season. And hopefully the defense is at least decent enough where it's not drastically impacting the Mets losing ball games throughout the remainder of the season. That'll do it for your guy Wardy, though, everybody. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on your biggest takeaway once again on everything that transpired in Mets land with these big updates. If you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on your way out. Shout out to BetUS, America's #1 sportsbook. Once more, make sure to check them out by clicking that link down below in the description. That way you too get a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. So your guy Wardy signing out. Have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out.